Hello everyone and welcome back to episode 4 of our Let's Learn series for Victoria 3, where we're playing as Portugal and aiming to take it from a minor power that it is today back to a major or maybe even a great power that it once was and should rightfully be. Now, in the first episode we went over an overview of the country and the political setup we're dealing with, as well as our budget and just generally population. What is it composed of? Who lives in our nation, and how is it being governed in 1836? In the second episode, we then went over state by state to identify what is our overall strategic position in our incorporated core states, unincorporated little islands off the west coast, and our colonies across Africa and a bit of India, Macau in China, and Portuguese Sunda Islands in East Indies. In a previous episode, we have actually managed to unpause for 4 weeks and come up with a strategy of, dealing with unemployment in Beira as a matter of priority, building up wood production to alleviate or to deal with the shortage of wood that we're currently experiencing, and reduce its price to alleviate the pressure on our budget or national treasury, and then even building a construction sector, which will then again raise demand for wood, but also help us build buildings faster in general. We have also set up our research to go with pharmaceuticals and quinine to boost our healthcare system, unlock an extra level of our healthcare system, which is currently set to charitable hospitals run by our Catholic Church. And this will help us decrease mortality in our incorporated states and increase the standard of living of our lower strata, both useful. Again, that will further boost population growth, but also just makes them happier and more loyalist. And quinine should help us unlock another level of max colonial affairs, so that will be another 50% increase in speed of colonization, and it will importantly remove all effects of malaria in your own colonies and states. And there's quite a bit, or there's also plenty of malaria in Africa at this time, and which is slowing down our colonization substantially. And as we can see, South America has come and gone. Asia is been carved up between major powers. So Africa is really the only place where we can attempt to rebuild our colonial empire. And so we need to be, the first to the post here. The British have already started to colonize Kenya here. France has started to colonize Senegal, and even what is this? Ivory Coast, yep, and some Denmark and some others are encroaching on Africa. So we need to do everything we can to speed up our colonization efforts and grab as much land as we possibly can as quickly as possible. So that's where our research is directed, and where our international policy is directed at. And again, domestically, we're building up logging camps and construction industry as a starter. Why? Because they're quick to build. They only require 200 construction, for logging camps, for example, and the construction sector itself only requires 100 construction. So they're quick to build, and we need to create 35,000 jobs in Beira ASAP to stop our Portuguese pops from starving and overall dragging down our population growth rate. Now, at the end of last episode, however, we have also identified that we have an unacceptable government, and we have talked a little bit about, just to give a quick general overview of interest groups. But let's now talk in earnest about governments and laws. This could actually take up the whole episode. We'll see. But we will try to unpause a little bit at the end of this episode as well. Now, let's have a look at this government screen, So we already talked at the end of last episode for 15 minutes about interest groups. Let's do a quick recap. There are 8 interest groups in any nation you play, Some of them have a little bit of local flavor, like landowners in Russia will be called something else. Armed forces in Japan will be called the shogunate or something, etc., etc. But generally, there's still 8 groups. Each interest group has a set of ideologies, which is their view of how the country should be run, and it is It is expressed through their endorsement of certain laws or opposition to certain laws, But together, this is their view of how the country should be run. Each interest group also has a leader, and that leader has his own ideology, and that can override some of the any of the ideologies that an interest group has for the time that this person is the leader, or it can supplement them and effectively kind of add to the ideologies, right? Whereas otherwise they might be neutral or just simply not have a view. So that is kind of each interest group. Now, all clout, what these sort of percentages, where does that come from? Well, that comes from political strength. Each pop, as we have seen in at the end of the previous episode, I gave a clear breakdown as to where that comes from. So without voting system, all political strength, therefore political power, comes from wealth. So each pop, and there's a number of pops who support the petite bourgeoisie, they're of a certain standard of living, basically of a certain wealth, and that wealth confers certain political power on them. That political power increases exponentially as pops move up the chain of standard of living. So going from 5 to 6 is a small increase, right? But by the time we get to standard of living of 10, 15, or 20, the political power is absolutely, it's sort of like 100 times the size of if we go to look at the standard of living of 20, political power will be definitely kind of dozens of times, more powerful. Those pops, they will have dozens of more political power per pop, as opposed to pops with standard of living of 5 or 6 or 7, right? So currently our wealthy pops, unsurprisingly, are considered in landowners, right? The aristocrats, they're the ones who own most of our buildings, since they're mostly agricultural, right? Especially, we have 1 million peasants who live in subsistence farms, and those are obviously run by aristocrats as well. Now, there are also, on top of that, some bonuses, flat bonuses to certain interest groups or professions, as we've seen in laws. For example, monarchy, right, gives 25% political strength to aristocrats. 25% political strength to aristocrats. Oligarchy gives 50% political strength to aristocrats and 25% to capitalists. Similarly, tenant farmers, for example, gives 25% flat increase in political strength of landowners, right? So no wonder landowners are strong, because there is a lot of bonuses here, right? The reality, they actually have 900,000 of political strength from average wealth of pops supporting it of 26, which gives an average political strength per active pop of 50. But they also get, in fact, even embedded into this is already the bonus, is a 75% bonus to political strength for aristocrats. So we don't even see that here. But then on top of that, we actually even get 25% from tenant farmers, 10% from local police force, and 5% from leader trade political operator. So that's another 40% increase on top of that, and a 75% increase for aristocrats. So they benefit massively from bonuses, right? If we look intelligentsia, that's only 139,000. Catholic Church, 270,000, right? Obviously, average wealth, you can see everywhere, is much lower. Armed forces, petite bourgeoisie, average wealth of the pops that support it is 13.8, which gives them only 9 per politically active pop, as opposed to, again, landowners, where its average wealth is 26 and 50 political power per active pop. Massive. Now, 8 groups, all political clout in a country is split. It's a zero-sum game, so if some clout kind of gets lost somewhere, it goes somewhere else, or if it gets, again, created, then everything gets redistributed, right? So if we create new shopkeepers somehow, or from peasants or from unemployed, right, they will gain political strength if they're politically active, right? Because you need to be politically active as well. And then they will then allocate that strength into kind of the pool for the country, and that gets spread out along these percentages depending on how many pops and of what wealth support each interest group. Now, if an interest group has less than 5% clout, it becomes marginalized. What does that mean? It means that it doesn't really matter what that interest group thinks of us that much, I guess, because whether it approves or disapproves doesn't change anything, because it can't activate its traits. And there aren't many people supporting it anyway. So they just kind of we also can't bring them into government if they are marginalized. Now, aside from this, so we talked about clout, we talked about ideologies, right? Traits. We talked about traits at the end of last episode as well, right? So radicals and loyalists. This is linked to increase or decrease in standard of living. If a pop's standard of living decreases, it will go from being neutral to being radical, or from being loyal, it will reduce to being neutral. If the standard of living increases, it goes from neutral to being loyal, or perhaps just from being radical to becoming neutral. If there are enough loyalist pops with the supporting a certain interest group, its approval will start to go up. And that will activate these traits, which can be activated regardless of whether the interest group is in government or not, or in opposition. That doesn't matter. You can still the nation still benefits from their traits. If they're marginalized, the traits don't work, even if there is a lot of support. Or for example, right now trade unions are very unhappy with us, but we don't care, so they don't actually activate work to rule traits of theirs. Intelligentsia, on the other hand, is 9% clout. They're unhappy with us, and they're activating social criticism and giving us minus 10% prestige. This rabble. Intelligentsia rabble. So that is how traits work. Let's go ahead and think about our government now. What actually matters here? So we have a monarchy. We have an unacceptable government, right? So why is that? Because unacceptable government, see these bars of the government at differences. So we have an illegitimate government of when we have legitimacy between 0 and 25. We then have an unacceptable government where it has legitimacy between 25 and 50. We then have a contested government with legitimacy of 50 to 75, And then we have legitimate government of legitimacy between 75 to 90, and a righteous government. And you can see the righteous government and legitimate government confer some bonuses. Mainly, they basically increase number of loyalists from standard of living increases, and just so we kind of gain more loyalists if the government is righteous. So everyone in the country kind of agrees that we're on the right course. For example, having a righteous government also gives us minus 25% law enactment time. So we just enact laws quicker, or rather the phases that laws need to take to get passed quicker. Whether we actually pass them or not still is unknown, because it depends on the clout of the interest group supporting that law, right? But for now, we've fallen into an unacceptable government. Why is that? First of all, let's have a look. What is that? Let's just finish with bonuses and malices. So legitimate government, righteous government gives us bonuses. Starting from contested government, that kind of removes all the bonuses and gives us -1 to opposition interest group approval. Not a big negative. It just means everyone who's in opposition is a little bit unhappy, and they make their voice heard. Whereas if our government is legitimate, then these guys just kind of acquiesce to be in opposition and don't cause much trouble for us. Now, if it is an unacceptable government, we get -2 to opposition interest group approval, right? So even if we have a lot of loyalists here, for example, Catholic Church actually could be at +4 right now, right? But they are at -2 because they have +2 overall, +4 from approval from laws, and -2 from unacceptable government. Now, it's actually worth, just coming back to approval quickly. There are effectively, I talked about radicals and loyalists and how those can create approval or disapproval for the interest group. And that is really the main source and the most kind of stable source over time of approval or disapproval. However, there are also 2 or 3 other sources of approval or disapproval, the first one of which is active laws, and whether the laws passed in our nation are congruent or are in line with the way this interest group thinks the country should be run. And if it is, for example, Catholic Church strongly endorses monarchy, and we have monarchy, so their approval goes up +2, right? So whatever laws we have, right, it adds up. So we have +2, +1, so +3. Then we have -1, unfortunately, because they oppose professional army, which we're running. They also strongly oppose colonial exploitation, right? And so that gives us effectively -3 versus +3, negating that. And then we have Catholic Church endorses religious schools, charitable hospitals, censorship, and legal guardianship. So that is where this +4 comes from. Now, approval or disapproval from active laws is capped at -5 to +5, right? So even if we remove these penalties, we wouldn't gain 2, 3, 7 approval, let's say, from active laws, because it's capped at 5 maximum, right? And that means with laws alone and no other modifiers, we could at most activate 1 positive trade. All right. Now the second source we can see here, other factors, it's a sort of malices from either the government legitimacy or some events that we can sometimes have to side or solve a certain situation by perhaps annoying or alienating one of the interest groups, and we can have sort of a malice here to their approval or a bonus, right? And that will typically last sort of 2, 5, sometimes 10 years. Right now we're suffering -2 from having an unacceptable government. So we have +4 from active laws, -2 for a net of +2. It doesn't show up now. We don't have any radicals or loyalists in the interest group, so there is no kind of malice or bonus from that. In addition, whenever we start to pass a law that one of our interest groups endorses or opposes, right, we will get a pretty big, pretty huge, sort of 5 to 10 approval, depending on whether they endorse it strongly or oppose it strongly. Temporary approval, disapproval for interest groups, right? Because they kind of think, okay, we're moving in the right direction. They makes them really happy that the government is finally making a change towards something that they want, or it makes them very angry that the government is making a change towards something they really do not want and they actively oppose. That kind of bonus or malice will last until while the law is being passed, however long that takes, and it can take easily at least half a year, probably more like 1 to 2 years to pass a law. Once the law is passed, that malice or bonus will decay over a period, I think, of 10 years. I think it's 5 or 10. I don't remember. I think it's, I don't remember, to be honest. We'll see when it actually happens. 5 or 10, it will slowly decay to no bonus, right? It's kind of either they're really happy, but then they gain progressively less, or they just kind of forget that law was passed and take it as for granted and don't really endorse you as much anymore. Similarly, if they get really angry over time, they kind of acquiesce and just forget, let bygones be bygones in a sense. Now, that is all to do with approval, and that is kind of a separate mechanic for interest groups. Right? We talked about clout, we talked about ideologies. If an interest group is in government and it endorses certain laws, that means we actually have the option to change those laws. For example, right now in our economic system, we could go with traditionalism. Why? Because we have landowners in government and they endorse traditionalism. Nobody really opposes it, right? Or rather, marginalized interest group oppose it, so that's not a lot. So they won't really have a lot of say while this law is being enacted. They won't be able to actively oppose it, or their opposition won't be very strong because it's only 1.5%. We could also pass agrarianism. Why? Again, because landowners endorse agrarianism as well. Now, even though we have interventionism, thank God, as it's a pretty good early game economic system, no one actually endorses it all that much. Most people just don't care. They do not care about interventionism. They neither oppose it nor endorse it. But depending on which interest groups we include in government, each having its own ideology and a leader, that determines which laws we can attempt to pass, right? Now you can see also, for example, as I was just looking at traditionalism or agrarianism, they both have a 50% chance to progress at every stage. Why? That's because if we were to click this, then landowners, they have 50% clout and they endorse this law. So they would put their clout behind that law to try and pass it. And therefore it has a very high chance to move through each successive stage. Now, in terms of, for example, taxation, we could go with per capita taxation, increasing our tax base quite substantially to by plus 7,000 in revenue, right? And we can actually pass it. Why can we pass it? Well, because it kind of shows petite bourgeoisie endorse it, but petite bourgeoisie is not part of our government. Intelligentsia, however, endorse it, and they are part of our government. But they only have 9% clout, right? So that we could start the enactment process for per capita taxation, but it would only have 9% chance of progressing at every stage. And there would be kind of stall. We'll talk about how laws passed. We'll have a look at that in detail. But to begin with, we have a 9% base success chance that can get increased or decreased through events. If it falls to 0, that means the law will be abandoned and we will not be able to attempt to enact it for 2 years. right? Now, we do have landowners who are part of government who oppose it, so they will actively try to sabotage the passing of per capita taxation. In effect, to pass a law, we need to enable it to be passed by including an interest group that endorses it as, in one of their ideologies, or at least their leader endorses it. And then we need to grow the clout, to maximize the clout that supports that law, right? And we also minimize the clout of interest groups that oppose that law, right? So if we really wanted to pass per capita taxation, right, ideally, we could look here, we could include petite bourgeoisie in our government. We obviously can't include trade unions. We could include armed forces in our government because they endorse this change. And then we could pass it. And we could also reduce the clout of landowners, or just throw them out of government, I think. All right. Then we would be able to pass per capita taxation. And in fact, we might even attempt that. Let's have a look, though, before, so that's one consideration when composing a government, is which laws do we want to be able to pass or not, how much clout we have to support certain laws, and which interest group do we want to potentially exclude so that they don't oppose the laws that we want to pass. Now, that's kind of it about interest groups. So we have traits, that depends on approval, that depends on radicals or loyalists, and laws that we support. They have ideologies that determines which laws they support, the way they see the country should be run, and which laws we can even attempt. Clout, we've talked about. Yeah, so that's pretty much it on interest groups, at least for now. Now, legitimacy of a government. We talked about, the bonuses that we might get from legitimate or righteous government. Contested government, we get a penalty. Unacceptable government, we gain an even bigger penalty. So we get -2 to opposition interest group approval. So only those interest groups in opposition get this malus. We get plus 50% enactment time for laws. Again, that's kind of adds another 2 months to every stage, right? Or every even kind of debate point, or I guess we'll see that when we actually pass a law. Now, plus 25% radicals from standard of living decreases, and we generally get plus 446 additional radicals per month, right? And we've unlocked for 4 weeks, so we built up 2,000 radicals while we have this unacceptable government. That's pretty quick, and these radicals will go into certain interest groups and make them unhappy. In fact, well, no, actually, intelligentsia simply opposes the laws in our country. That's what's making them unhappy. And you can see here, this is what I talked about. So right now, total approval is -5, capped from actual value of -6, right? So they kind of just hate, even though they are in government and they have 9% clout, they really hate the way the country is run, because they oppose local police force, oppose religious schools, oppose legal guardianship, strongly oppose land taxation, they oppose oligarchy, oppose national supremacy. They don't agree with the way countries run. So these are kind of the bones. And if we get an illegitimate government, again, it's just more penalties, right? Yes, must have political movement to enact laws. So we can't even pass any laws if we have an illegitimate government. Radicals across the country will increase depending on how low legitimacy is. Now, have a look at the calculations. So why do we have 46 legitimacy? Now, this is due to head of state's interest group intelligentsia in government gives us plus 30. Right, now, monarchy and oligarchy, right, see, so we kind of hover over the monarchy. One of the benefits it gives us 200 authority, gives us 10% government ideology penalty. Again, we'll talk about that in a bit. It gives 25% political strength to aristocrats that we already talked about. But one of the other things it gives us some legitimacy simply from including head of state in government. And what does that mean? It means our head of state, whoever it is, but right now it's a monarch. It's our Queen Maria Dobroganga. And her interest group is intelligentsia. That's who her preferred group. That's who she considers herself to be part of, being a reformer that she is. And that means if we simply include intelligentsia, regardless of what their clout is, just including them, because our head of state supports them, gives us 30 legitimacy, right? Just that. But then, clout of all interest groups included in our government also matters. And right now, we have total clout of government is 70, gives us 71 legitimacy, right? Where does that come from? Well, government clout of 59.4 that is the sum of 50.3% for landowners plus 9% for intelligentsia, right? That's the 59.4, I guess, rounded up, times 120. Why? Because we have an oligarchy. So that kind of gives us a 20% extra on top of whatever clout we have included in government, simply to kind of say that, okay, whichever interest group is in government kind of carries more clout for the purposes of legitimacy, given it is, the head of state has included them in the government and therefore conferred some authority on them, right? So, the sum of these then, we have 71 from clout, because 59% of clout gets increased by 20%, that's 71 legitimacy, plus 30 from simply including intelligentsia, because our head of state supports them. So that should be 101 legitimacy for us, right? We should have a righteous government. But unfortunately, however, we then suffer some penalties. And the major penalty we suffer here is a government ideology penalty. And that basically arises from having the interest groups that are included in government, even if you include ones with lots of clout, right? And you would think, okay, well, that should make the government legitimacy because a lot of the population support these interest groups, right? But no, yes, you will get legitimacy from clout, but you will lose legitimacy if they have opposing views, right? And they don't really work well together, right? It's kind of complete chaos in this government, right? Because, landowners want one thing. They are paternalistic, statocratic, and patriarchal, for example. So they love legal guardianship. They think women should remain the property, and also not property quite, I guess, at this point, but they are legally under the guardianship of men and enjoy very few rights. Whereas intelligentsia, obviously, say here, for example, anti-clerical, or what is it? Liberal. So liberal, they oppose legal guardianship. And because of that, and that's true for many ideologies, right? Ideologically, intelligentsia are almost, diametrically opposed to landowners. They disagree on practically everything, right? And we gain from each one of these, depending on whether they endorse or strongly endorse or oppose or strongly oppose different laws, right? We gain a penalty, right? So we get a 5 here. So legal guardianship, one thing wants legal guardianship. Landowners want legal guardianship. Intelligentsia wants propertied women. Therefore, we get a disagreement here and we get a penalty of 5. Distribution of power. Now, intelligentsia strongly endorses, right? And landowners strongly oppose. So that gets a 10. There's also some bonuses, bonuses and malices from monarchy and oligarchy. So oligarchy kind of smoothed things over because it lets several interest groups work together. So it kind of smooths over the penalties from ideological differences, whereas monarchy increases them, right? Because it kind of wants present that strong front. So whichever disagreements interest groups have, it just looks bad, makes the government dysfunctional. So that is the reason, really, right? That is the reason. We do have intelligentsia included, and we do have a lot of clout. 60% of the political strength of our nation is included in government, right? However, they just disagree with each other, and they can't work together very well. Now, what could we do, right? So we could click. So as long as we click reform government, as long as we don't actually do anything, we can click things around and just see what it looks like. As long as we don't press confirm, nothing is set in stone. So we can just go exit and it goes back to normal, right? So we can experiment as much as we want. Now, the game here gives us 3 presets here for maximize, 3 kind of sets of interest groups that will maximize our legitimacy. So we could get landowners and Catholic Church, right? So now we're going to throw out intelligentsia from government. That will obviously remove that 30 legitimacy that we get from just including them. However, removing that ideology penalty, right, actually gives us a net. So you remember that was minus 55. Now it's only minus 5, right? So we just removed 50 penalty of 50 to legitimacy by excluding intelligentsia from this, right? We have also lost 30 there, 30 positive legitimacy from that we had while we had intelligentsia in there, but net, that's an increase of 20. Plus, we have included Catholic Church, which has 14% clout, that's increased by a further 20%, right? And that's why our legitimacy is now total clout represented in the government is 64.4, increased by 20% from oligarchy. That's 77 legitimacy, and we lose 5 because they disagree on army model, right? I guess, yeah, Catholic Church wants peasant levies, right? And landowners want, landowners approve of it and Catholic Church disapproves of it. So that's one option. Now we could also get landowners, Catholic Church, and petite bourgeoisie and get 69. Now, whether it's 72 or 69, as we discussed, doesn't really matter, because as long as we're in the band of 50 to 75, we have a contested government. Now, we are bolstering Catholic Church and petite bourgeoisie, and the buildings we're building kind of have laborers and shopkeepers mostly, so we'll probably see an increase in clout, or we should do, in Catholic Church and petite bourgeoisie. So hopefully this will grow, right? So I would actually take that penalty of 3, because with time, this should grow and they should increase in legitimacy. However, also what's important to consider is by including petite bourgeoisie, we again unlock some laws, right? Some laws that we can enact, or perhaps we increase the clout. For example, for now, if we go to land-based taxation, well, we're still at 9%. Hang on. Oh, so we haven't actually confirmed. Exit so if we go to this, we should have at least 10%. So that is another thing. So I would rather actually go with this version, lose 3 points of legitimacy with the view that this will grow with a little bit of time. And we can also pass the laws that we want, right? I feel like charity hospital, religious schools we already have passed. We do want to maintain monarchy. State religion is fine. National supremacy is fine. Patriarchal, we are fine with censorship and legal guardianship. So we're kind of full agreement with Catholic Church. Petite bourgeoisie, they like national supremacy. They like migration controls. They like monarchy. Good, we're in agreement. Meritocratic, in elected bureaucrats. Whereas what do we have? We have appointed bureaucrats, which they're all right with. Although they would prefer elected bureaucrats. They do like per capita taxation, which would be good for us. And we'll see why, because it would increase our national revenue and help us either speed up our construction by financing more construction sectors, or perhaps start building up our military and navy to actually potentially project our power overseas. So again, they want elected bureaucrats also, and per capita taxation. And their last, patriotic ideology, they want strongly endorse dedicated police force rather than local police force. And they want the kind of stance on internal securities. They endorse secret police and national guard. And they endorse outlawed dissent and censorship. Censorship, we're fine. Secret police or national guard, we could potentially institute. We'll see. That's right now we don't have any home affairs institution or law passed with no home affairs department at all. Police, possible. Dedicated or militarized police force is possible. So that is one option, right? So we'll fix our government legitimacy. We have the laws that we support. Unfortunately, the leader of petite bourgeoisie is Republican, so he actually endorses presidential republic and parliamentary republic, and endorses elected bureaucrats. Okay, that they already do anyway. The Catholic Church is pacifist, so they don't oppose professional army, but they endorse national militia and endorse no colonial affairs. Jesus. And landowners, however, authoritarian. So they like secret police also, outlawed dissent. They like oligarchy, autocracy, and single-party state. Okay, so they actually endorse secret police. Very interesting. If we actually exit reform, so if we did go to no home affairs, we have a 50% to pass National Guard. Okay, secret police we can't pass because we don't have central archives yet. Okay, so let's forget about that. Let's again reform this way. So that's one option to increase legitimacy of our government. Now also one thing to note that I haven't spoken about yet is, okay, so including an interest group in government doesn't change their approval or their clout in any way, right? So if they're in government or out, that their approval or clout do not change, nor does it make them happier to be included, right? All it does, it enables us to even attempt to pass laws, and their clout now counts towards the success chance of of passing the laws or advancing, I guess, through various stages. When we'll see when we actually pass a law how that works, of the laws that they endorse. However, excluding someone from government does annoy them. So you see, we've included intelligentsia, and immediately we have these indicators here. And what happens is, whenever you exclude an interest group from government, throw them out of government, 25% of the population supporting that group becomes radical. So you see, we have 10,000 people supporting intelligentsia. We can have a look. It's mostly bureaucrats, and some aristocrats, some clergy, and clerks. Right? So it's mostly bureaucrats and clerks that support them. And if we were to throw them out, right, naturally a quarter of them, about 2,500, become more radical. Now, they become more radical because they're currently neutral. And as I spoke before, right, when you're neutral, you become radical if you get sort of like unhappy, either from a standard of living decrease or here being thrown out of government. We also lose 11 loyalists because there are 11 loyalists in intelligentsia that have had their standard of living increased recently. But they will, instead of becoming radical, they will just move from being loyalist to becoming disillusioned and just being passive supporters of intelligentsia, not too eager. Right, so that is why you don't really want to include and exclude, kind of rejig your government too often, as that will build up radicals. You can see it's not too many, so it doesn't really matter that much at the start of the game, right? Especially while you don't have voting, etc., things like that. And in fact, when you have voting, you're going to have to actually it will cost something to rejig the government, but that is a topic for a later time. Now, let's see if is there any other composition we could do that could, for example, exclude the landowners, potentially include armed forces. Nope, that doesn't really work. Yeah, so I guess, the best for us for now is to go this way. We include petite bourgeoisie, Catholic Church, and landowners. Yeah, now landowners, what do they want? They strongly endorse landed voting and autocracy. They endorse oligarchy, monarchy, theocracy, hereditary bureaucrats. They want local police force. Yeah, so we won't really be able to pass, for example, if we wanted a dedicated police force. But how do they feel about per capita taxation? They're neutral towards per capita taxation. So fine, let's just confirm the government. We throw out intelligentsia, fine, we create some radicals, but we increase our legitimacy massively, right? Hopefully, with a bit of time, and once we build up our economy, build up a few more shopkeeper and labourer pops that support the Catholic Church and petite bourgeoisie, perhaps we can even grow into a legitimate government. That will be very beneficial to us. Let's keep it this way, and that's pretty much everything about interest groups and government formation. At least for now, I think that's enough. One actually maybe thing that I should note is that an interplay between traits, as I've talked about, which depend on approval, which depend on whether we have active law, whether the laws of our nation are congruent with the ideology of interest group, and also whether there are any malices from the government that we have, which this will change once we're on pause, and any radicals and loyalists, right? So if we have enough loyalists, we will activate positive traits. If we have enough radicals right here, we'll activate negative traits. But also, if an interest group has 20% of clout or more, they become powerful as opposed to just being merely influential. So you can be marginalized at less than 5% clout, right? So we see rural folk is considered marginalized because its clout is below 5%. Armed forces are considered influential because its clout is above 5 but less than 20. But landowners are considered to be powerful because its clout is above 20%. And what does that do? That doubles the effect of the traits. So normally, if landowners had clouds of 10%, then these family ties, they would only give us 10% influence bonus. Right? But since this interest group is powerful, as the tooltip says, their interest group traits have a plus 100% stronger effect. So that is kind of the very last thing to mention. Now, we'll have a look at our laws in a second, but actually one thing that is related to this that we can do, we actually remove the armies from our outliners since we're not in any kind of active war. And we can instead put our interest groups in the outliner and just watch as our clout and approval changes. And we can also go to politics, go back to politics and go back to laws and just think, what can we pass perhaps with this government that we have now? What do we want to pass and where do we want to take our nation? As I kind of alluded to already, I would say that it would be great to pass a per capita taxation. Why? Because, let's first of all say, so right now we're on land-based taxation, a traditional form of land-based taxation collected mainly from the peasantry. What does that mean? That we have at a medium level, which is where kind of we want to be, or maybe below. That gives us a little bonuses, but going to higher, very high, gives us, noticeable malices, right, or penalties. But at medium level, we tax income at 7%, all the wages, 35% consumption tax rate, and 0.7 land tax levied on all peasants. But not all pops, just peasants. Now, in per capita taxation, a tax system that disproportionately taxes the poor through a combination of income and per capita taxes. Now, predicted revenues, here's 18.3 thousand, whereas our current revenue is 11.4 thousand. So we would gain another 7,000 in revenue, helping us close that deficit, right, and giving us some surplus. Maybe we build up our gold reserves, but we will also build very quickly some more construction and more government administration, perhaps, to help with that bureaucracy, and spend this money to kind of support a larger state, and therefore build faster and kind of industrialize faster, grow our GDP faster. This would be quite nice for us to get right now, or soon, right? What does that mean? Why is that? That's because we will increase our income tax rate to 15% from 7%. Consumption tax rate will remain the same. We will institute a 0.7 per capita tax, right? So collected from non-peasant pop. So every single pop, rich, middle strata, so upper, middle, or lower strata, everybody will just pay a flat 0.7. Now, obviously, upper strata have a wealth of 25 plus, so they have large income. So for them, these are pennies, right? It's just like 1% of their income. For lower strata, it taxes them disproportionately more because it's a flat amount. They obviously have less income, so they will get pretty upset with us. They will drop their standard of living, but that will increase revenue for us. Now, we will also reduce a land tax from 0.7 to 0.35. That is interesting. Yeah, 0.7 to 0.35. But overall, we'll increase our... So taking this from everyone, now middle and upper strata won't really care, but lower strata will get annoyed because their general standard of living isn't that high already. I mean, 35,000 of them, or 70,000 of them are unemployed and starving. So perhaps we hold off on this for now, because we'd probably be better off just going to our budget and increasing our taxes to land-based taxes kind of to very high, taxing income a little bit more. That would give us a penalty, and increasing our land tax from 0.7 to 1 per peasant. That would reduce our government legitimacy by -10, but again, that doesn't matter. We'll still be a contested government just like we are now. We would gain 50% more radicals from standard of living decreases, which we are kind of experiencing from time to time right now. We would also gain -20% attraction of interest group in government, as they would be unpopular. That's actually not great, because it would make fewer people support petite bourgeoisie and Catholic Church because they would be unpopular. So interesting. So for now, maybe we actually just let it go. Well, yeah, maybe we hold off on per capita taxation for now. Now, what else can we change? Local police force. Can we go to a dedicated police force, for example? Because that would give us, that would remove some power from landowners, right? And we would get fewer radicals from standard of living decreases. Yeah, so this would actually be a good change for us. This country has a dedicated police force with standardized training. Now, if we were to try to enact this now, we have a 10% chance because of 10% clout from petit bourgeoisie who support this. Armed forces also support this, but they're not in government. Intelligentsia also support this, but we kick them out of government. And landowners oppose this, right? So this would, to be honest, this would not succeed. So not really an option. And again, I'll talk about it more when we actually start to enact a law to demonstrate why it matters. Yeah, so we need to reduce the strength of landowners as much as we can, to be honest, but how can we, right? I mean, the reason they... Yeah, well, let's have a look in government, landowners. It's really the aristocrats that support them. Yeah, it's really the aristocrats that are driving their clout. So we kind of maybe need to create more pops that support other groups for now. So let's just go ahead and unpause, continue with our construction effort. But I don't think there's anything to do with laws for now. Let's just wait and try to... and hope that the political strength and the clout of landowners declines. Now, so go ahead, sorry, and pause. Let's actually have a look what's happening. Now we have familial ties activated. British response to opium ban. Great Britain has responded angrily to the Qing ban on opium with multiple threats towards the government of Great Qing. Qing-Sikh rivalry declared. Okay, diplomatic ties with Papal States. Due to Papal States establishing an interest in Iberia, we can now conduct diplomacy with them. Okay, a bunch of countries have done that. So that's fine. So kind of things are happening. Let's go ahead and unpause. And actually let the game run for a little bit. Finally. And just see what's happening, right? So we're running a tiny deficit. That's perfectly fine. Actually very healthy. You know, having gold reserves... kind of for some enact dedicated police force political movement. Okay, armed forces, intelligentsia, and rural folk support this. This movement is so. Okay, that's interesting. Let's talk about political movement, right? So a political movement champions a particular law, either to enact it, preserve it, or restore it. Individual pops, agitators, and interest groups can join political movements, which provide it with both support and radicalism. Pursuing the change a political movement desires will be easier as you have its support. Failing to pursue the change could lead to the movement becoming revolutionary, initiating a revolution. Now, interesting that we just talked about it, and it comes up here. So we have some more, some more mechanics of kind of lawmaking to talk about. Now, as I've mentioned, groups that are in government enable us to pass laws that they support. You know, at least just they unlock them as an option, right? And as I already talked about, the success to actually pass those laws depends on the clout of the interest groups supporting that law. Now, interest groups outside of government, in opposition, right? They, you know, we can't enact laws that they might want to pass, but what they can do from time to time is form a political movement and kind of force it upon us, right? Because right now they've started a movement to enact dedicated police force, which we actually wanted to enact a second ago. You know, while this movement is active, it's basically telling us, look, their support is medium, 25. Where does that come from? Well, it comes from armed forces, intelligentsia, and rural folk all coming together to support this movement because they all endorse this law. Their combined clout, plus whatever, a few like supporting pops, basically equates to 25. Right? That's their support. Now, radicalism is low. Why? Because there aren't a lot of radicals in these interest groups. So they kind of want to pass this law. They're not like crazy about it. However, as time passes and this, we're not dealing with this movement, right? We're not passing it. This movement is causing 195 individuals to become more radical every month, right? So every 4 weeks. If the movement succeeds, however, it will make 26.9 thousand individuals more loyal. That would be quite nice. We only have 10,000 radicals, 26,000 loyalists right now. So let's go ahead, go to laws again. So we just explored this, how convenient. And now we'll see the dedicated police force, right, has a 35% chance to progress. Why? Because petit bourgeoisie is in government and it endorses this law, that gives us 10%. And dedicated police force political movement has a strength of 25 because a total of 25 cloud of interest groups in opposition are now, formed an active movement in our legislature to push this through, right? To have a 35% chance to progress at every stage of lawmaking. Now, we still have landowners who oppose this change, and only -5. So if we were to pass it, or begin to pass it, we would lose familial ties, which is giving us quite a bit of influence, and which gives an infamy decay, but it's not critical. That influence is not critical. So I'm actually going to go ahead and try to pass dedicated police force. It is not a given that when you start to pass that you will succeed. So let's go ahead and click enact and just trace through what actually happens, right? Now, we're enacting a law now, dedicated police force, right? We can suffer 3 setbacks. If we do, the law will be abandoned, right? Depending on kind of our government structure, these 3 stages have different names, but to pass a law, we need to go from introduction to consideration, and then from consideration to assent, and then assent needs to succeed, and then the law is passed. So it needs to pass through 3 stages, right? Without incurring 3 setbacks. Now, so there we go. Law enactment time, so it's 100 days, sorry. Yeah, so before I thought it was 150 or maybe 180 days. It's actually 100 days. Maybe that was changed. So 100 days between checkpoints. So every 100 days, something will happen. There will be a checkpoint, and a few things can happen basically every 100 days. This is reduced a little bit from legislative efficiency, from having a slight surplus of authority, right? But broadly speaking, it's okay. It's 99 days rather than 100. So every 100 days, there will be a checkpoint. What will happen at that checkpoint? Well, we could succeed. Enactment success indicates the percentage chance that a law will progress to the next phase at the next checkpoint. It is equal to the base success chance plus any effects accumulated during the enactment process. So you could succeed and move to the next phase, i.e. move from introduction to consideration. Then in the consideration phase, the success chance will move it to assent. And when we're in the assent, the success chance will actually make us pass the law. So this is 35%. Why is it 35? Again, it's a sum of all the clout of interest groups that are in government that are supporting this law, as well as interest groups in opposition or outside of government that are supporting the political movement to enact it. So we have 35%. Now, and that's so every 100 days, we have a 35% chance to advance to the next phase and ultimately pass the law. As an alternative, we have an 18.4% chance to advance enactment, to have an advance to advance at the next checkpoint. What does that mean? Enactment advance indicates the percentage chance that the enactment process of a law will advance somehow at the next checkpoint, even if it won't complete or progress to the next phase yet. It is derived from the enactment's base success chance. So something kind of positive most likely will happen if we get advanced, right? That's 18.4 chance. Why is it 18.4? Well, base success chance is 35 times 2 from advanced factors, so that will be 70. And we have stalled enactment chance is 46. And we have this end of discussion factor, which I think is kind of depends how many checkpoints have actually passed. So you're less likely I think the longer it takes. I actually didn't figure this out myself yet. The presence of an end of discussion factor represents that interest groups in government consider further discussion of the merits of the law currently being enacted no longer useful. The lower this factor gets, the more negative pressure it puts on the possibility that the enactment may advance or stall. Yeah, okay. So it's kind of, I think, if it just drags on too long, then end of discussion factor goes up, and it kind of people just get tired that this is kind of neither moving forward nor backwards, and slowly the law just kind of the legislative impetus behind the law just dies out. Now we do have stall chance of 46, which gets taken away from advance. Now where does stall comes from and what is it? So stalled enactment indicates the percentage chance that the enactment process of a law will be substantially hindered at the next checkpoint. Its base chance is equal to the total clout of opposing interest groups in government. Where does it come from? Well, we have 46, so it's landowners have 50%. So end of discussion factor 0.92. So it actually reduces that. So actually end of discussion, I think it is correct, like what I just said. It's about people getting kind of a bit tired of debating this, but it actually makes it more likely to succeed then rather than fail. And just kind of thinks, okay, we've debated this enough, let's just move on and pass it already if there isn't any strong opposition. So end of discussion factor is currently 0.92, reducing their clout by 8%. And effectively, at every checkpoint, which currently lasts 100 days, with a 35% chance to just progress to the next phase, another 18% chance that something positive will happen and maybe increasing the success chance, or see maybe decreasing the stall chance, or 46% we will stall, right? So let's go ahead and unpause. If we quit, we actually have this here now. Sorry, actually, I haven't finished. Wow. So what else is happening? Right, so because we started to enact this, we'll see Armed Forces Veteran Consultation activated. This is due to their approval of +6. So we now have 10% military research speed. Intelligentsia social criticisms deactivated. This is because their approval is now -1. Now landowners' family ties is deactivated, so we have lost 20% influence. So we're now at +300 rather than 440. Again, doesn't really matter. All that made us do is moved the infamy decay bonus from 25% to 18%. Very marginal. And petite bourgeoisie are now activated middle managers because they're happy. Their approval is happy because we get +10% bureaucracy now, which is very nice actually. We can even think about potentially incorporating some of these states, as we now have that extra bureaucracy. It's just lying around there. Or we could just take that bonus for state construction efficiency. Now, why did this happen? Again, as I have mentioned, where does approval, so traits were activated, that means approval has gone up. Why did it go up? Well, again, there are several sources of approval for an interest group. One is from whether the laws that they support are actually enacted by our government, that is capped at -5 and +5, right? Then we have other factors from leaders or from this commander retirement, contested government legitimacy, so other factors. Plus, there is the effect of radicals and loyals. Plus, this is what I've mentioned, law changes. You'll see armed forces endorse the current change to a dedicated police force. Since they endorse it, it's +5. So we go from 6 to 11. After being passed, +5 will decay to +1 over the following 60 months, so 5 years. Yeah, so I couldn't quite remember if it's 5 or 10, but it's over 5 years. It will decay to +1. So there we are. So we're currently, while we're passing the law, we're getting +5. And when we pass it, it will linger a little bit, but decline slowly. But that made us activate some traits, petite bourgeoisie and armed forces. And we will also, once we pass it, for example, right, we should gain actually approval here from the armed forces because they endorse the change. No, actually, this is a political movement, but they might actually not really care in terms of their ideologies. No, they do. They denote dedicated police force, so we should get +1 approval, kind of permanent, right? Because we're still under the cap of 5, right, in active approval generated from active laws. So we'll get +1 kind of permanent here, and then we get a +5 will decay to, oh yeah, +1. Okay, that's why it's, yeah, we will decay to +1. That's exactly what the tooltip says. So there we are, guys. So we're gonna continue with passing of this law, but we have now come to the end of the episode. So I'm gonna go ahead and make a cut here. Again, we're only on pause for another couple of weeks. But again, as I said from the start, the first 4, maybe another kind of 5th and 6th episode will be pretty slow as I go over all of the mechanics. And again, these are the core loops of economics that we've gone through and politics. Now we kind of know. So now, from now on, I expect the game to go a bit quicker. But hopefully, you found this useful. If you have, please give it a like. It helps to get the starting episodes of this series out there. Yeah, hope you enjoyed it. And yeah, I'm excited for this playthrough, and I hope to see you in the next episode where, we'll actually unpause and get on with building up our economy, furthering our geopolitical aims. And we will talk through more as, how and laws actually get passed, and we'll monitor what happens at those checkpoints. But that's it for now, guys. Thanks a lot for watching. Really hope to see you in the next episode. Bye.